All right, today we're tackling something pretty heavy. We're going to unpack a psychological argument from our source material that tries to make sense of some really intense and frankly confusing reactions we've all been seeing lately.
So, here's the big question at the center of it all. You've probably seen it yourself, right? A raw, undeniable tragedy happens, and some of the public reactions, they just seem to defy logic. They fly in the face of what most of us would think is a normal or even a moral response. It's a real puzzle, and it's left a lot of people scratching their heads.
So to get to the heart of this puzzle, our main source, commentator Melanie Phillips, zooms in on a specific event, the aftermath of the October 7th attacks. She believes she's identified a pattern of behavior there that, on the surface, just doesn't add up.
So what kind of behaviors are we talking about? Well, the sources point to a few key things. You've got the widespread campus protests, for sure. But it gets more specific, like the act of tearing down posters of kidnapped hostages. And then there's the rhetoric. Language that seems to flip everything on its head, recasting the victims as villains and rebranding absolute barbarism as some form of legitimate resistance. That's the puzzle we're trying to solve.
Okay, so what could possibly explain all that? The source material suggests it's a kind of psychological trap. And the key to understanding it, well, it's a concept I bet a lot of you have actually heard of. And that concept is cognitive dissonance. You know that feeling, right? That this squirmy, deeply uncomfortable mental static you get when something you see or hear directly attacks a belief you hold really dear? Our brains hate that feeling. I mean, absolutely despise it. And they'll do pretty much anything to make it stop. So, according to Phillips' argument, the events of October 7th triggered a massive, high-voltage dose of cognitive dissonance for a certain group of people. Think of it like a head-on collision between a cherished worldview they'd built their identity on and a brutal, horrific, undeniable reality. Okay, so what is that cherished worldview? This is where the source gets really specific. It argues that for many people, their very identity as a good person is wrapped up in a few key beliefs. You know, being liberal and compassionate, believing in this idea of a brotherhood of man, and, this is the crucial part, always supporting the causes of those they see as the oppressed. And the source points to the Palestinian cause as a primary example of that.
And then, bang, the collision, the brutal, raw reality of the October 7th attacks. I mean, we're talking about deliberate slaughter, torture, rape, all proudly live-streamed by the people doing it. This just violently shattered the neat and tidy narrative of the oppressed victim that their entire worldview depended on.
And this quote from Melanie Phillips really nails the identity crisis she's describing. Think about it. The cause they have supported as representing goodness is shown to be evil. And what does that make them? It makes them evil. Whoa, I mean, if the cause you've hung your entire sense of moral goodness on is suddenly revealed to be evil, what does that say about you? According to the source, that thought is so completely unbearable, the mind just has to find a way to reject it, no matter what.
So what do you do? How does your brain solve that impossible problem? Well, the source claims it doesn't do the logical thing and change the belief. Oh no, it does something way more extreme. It literally changes reality. Or at least it tries to, through something called inversion and projection.
Okay, let's break down this mental gymnastics routine. Step 1 of this reality flip, according to the argument, is you recast the victims of the atrocity as the real villains. You make them the oppressors. See how that works? It's an instant relief valve for that mental pressure, because now you can just blame the victims for what happened to them. Okay, step 2. Now you have to deal with the violence itself. So what looks to the outside world like just sadistic barbarism gets a new label. It's legitimate resistance. And just like that, you get to keep your original worldview. You can still support the oppressed, even when their actions are, well, horrific. And that brings us to the final step, which the source ties directly to something we've actually seen happen. Look, if Israeli suffering is a fact, and that fact completely destroys your new inverted story, then any evidence of that suffering is now a direct threat. It's a threat to your moral identity. And what do you do with a threat? You erase it. And this is where that quote just hits so hard. The argument is that when someone tears down a hostage poster, it's not just some political statement. It's a desperate psychological act. They have to literally with their fingernails tear it out of sight. Because that poster, that face, is the one piece of evidence that contradicts the narrative they've hung their entire moral worth on. It's an attempt to physically erase the thing that shatters their sense of self. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. Because the second source we looked at, which is a very personal testimony, suggests this whole pattern, this cognitive dissonance and worldview flipping, isn't just about this one event. It might actually be part of a much, much wider phenomenon. This person describes their own journey of slowly breaking away from a dominant narrative they used to believe in. And for them, it wasn't one big explosion. It was more like a series of small, wait, what? Moments. These little head-scratching instances where what they were seeing with their own eyes just didn't line up with the script they'd been handed.
And you can see the progression here. For this person, it started with politics, feeling like Hillary's nomination was more of a coronation than a real choice. Then it moved into social stuff, like actually meeting Black Trump supporters, which totally contradicted the simple racist label they'd heard. And then it got really personal, feeling coerced by their own surgeon after an operation over vaccine mandates. Each one of these moments was like another crack in the foundation of their worldview.
So, what's the connection here? The point is that both sources, in very different ways, are describing the exact same thing. That feeling when your direct, personal experience crashes right into an established, everyone knows this is true worldview. And when that happens, you're stuck. You have a choice to make. Do you ignore what your own eyes are telling you, or do you start to question the whole worldview?
Which brings us right to the core takeaway of all this material. The sources are really arguing that these intense reactions we're seeing aren't just about a simple political disagreement. No, it's something much, much deeper.
The ultimate argument here is that this isn't about policy. It's not even really about geopolitics. It's about a deep, internal, psychological war to protect your own identity as a good person. And when that identity is under threat, your mind will put up some powerful, and as the sources suggest, even reality-bending defenses. So let's just boil it all down to the three-step process the sources propose. Step 1. Your worldview and your moral identity become one and the same. Step 2. Some contradictory event happens that just shatters that worldview, causing that intense mental discomfort. And step 3. To fix that feeling and save your sense of self, you flip reality on its head.
And all of this leaves us with a really tough final question. And it's a question for every single one of us. When our own cherished beliefs get slammed by uncomfortable facts, how can we tell the difference? How do we know if we're genuinely waking up to a new truth? Or if we're just doubling down on the old story because it's the one that protects our ego and makes us feel like a good person?